I'm back. Okay, so I've done some dishes. Now my painting is pretty dry. Actually, it's totally dry. It just feels a little bit cool, but I'll be able to do what I want to do now. And what I want to do now is add a little definition to this bud, and then maybe do a little darkening of the leaves. So to do the bud, I am going, the bloom, the bud, whatever we want to call it, I'm going to use a synthetic brush because I have better control of the water. And this is also kind of nice because then I can scrub a little harder at these colors. So I'm going to get some more yellow. I'm going to make an orange again. And just a little bit of red. And what I can even do is kind of mix them together like that. And I think I do want a little bit more yellow. And I do actually kind of want a dark orange because I am going to try to add some definition here. So let's test. That's pretty dark. I might want that a little bit brighter. Well, maybe let's see how it goes. So then what I want to do is I want to look back at my bud, my bloom, whatever. And I see that, especially where my light source is coming from, I see kind of shadow here and shadow under here and shadow on the back side of this. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So what I'm going to do is taking kind of a lot of paint on my brush, but this brush doesn't hold very much paint because it's synthetic. I'm going to go ahead and darken under here. And then once I have that little line, I now want to soften that line. And I'm actually going to try to cover the pencil because then you don't see the pencil so much. So I'm going to get some of that paint off and tap out my brush a little bit and then just soften that edge. Now I can do the same thing where this part is overlapping here. There would be a little shadow under there. So and that's a little more orange, so maybe I'll get a little more red. And let's make a little. Now what can be nicer than what I just did here, which is just a line, is to kind of make some dots and dashes, which just, it's just not so severe. And so then I'm rinsing my brush out, I'm tapping it out, and then I'm going to go ahead and soften, but I'm going in the direction of the bloom, pulling my brush down like that. Now all of these little lines make more lines, so you got to be a little bit careful about that, but you just kind of keep softening. This softening the glaze, that takes a lot of practice, and it's probably not something you want to practice on your new drawing. Maybe you want to practice on, little lines like this. Just so you can kind of see like what happens and how do you phase it out? How do you soften all of that? Oops. All right, so I'm not liking this line at all. I wish I had done it in that dot and dash, but good to know. All right, so now I think we should do it over here. And I say dot and dash because it's an organic thing. It's not a car or a pot or a tea kettle. It's an organic object. Now because, and so of course it's not all in a straight line. Now because watercolor is transparent, I can also kind of, if I'm trying to soften, I can drag that paint around down here a little bit, maybe put some under here. and I can still see the green up above it, which is nice. And then I think I'm going to, this is a little risky, but I think I'm going to touch this green in between these two glaze spots. Just to accentuate that line too and kind of fill that in. Now that is moving because I've now wet the paper and I don't actually want that to move there. So then I squeeze out my brush and I can lift over there. Now sometimes you lift too much and or you end up just wetting this paper right here, and so then the paint continues to move. So then you kind of just have to watch it and make sure that you keep picking it up so that we have this defined space. Now I would also like it to be a little darker right here because the petal is also overlapping right there. So let's go ahead and do that. And let's see, yeah, it kind of is a, I guess what I'm noticing is that this line is a little darker there, and I can see that it's not a straight line. So now that's wet, I'm gonna need a little more paint, which is much easier to pick up now that I have this synthetic brush. I can scrub it a little harder. And I'm trying to make my puddle. I don't want it pasty. And that's a little too much paint, which is why I'm rubbing it off. So what I want to do is I just want to kind of come in here and make some dots and dashes in there to kind of add some, I need a little more contrast. This isn't reading as a different shape to me yet. So that's a little better. Now what I'd also like is I would like this to read as a different petal. Now this is where you can kind of, I still have my object here to give me some direction, but I can also kind of go rogue a little bit. I'm loosening what I just did so that I can get that, I should say loosening. I'm lifting what I just did a little bit to get this part of the petal back. That's good. And what I also want to do is I want more contrast here because I want this to read as a petal behind. And so what I'm going to do is wet my brush a little, and then this I would not do with the sable brush, but I'm going to try to scrub out a little bit of what I had put in there. And it's, you know, now it's dry, so it's a little bit harder. And on this paper, I'm gonna have a little bit more trouble because I can make it pill pretty easily. So that's about all I can do to lift. If I had proper watercolor paper, I could lift a lot more. But now that I have that, what I can do is I can make another contrast point. So I can come back here with my orange and then come around here to put something like that in so that I'm getting a little more contrast. So now what you see is this is moving again. So I just want to take my brush and lift that out. And I have pilled my paper, so I need to be a little careful. So yeah, so that's going to be a little tricky right there. Let me see if I can just scrub it just a little bit more. Yeah. And then, you know, I do have some of the paint. It doesn't totally lift it, so there's still a little color there, but at least enough to give me a little bit of contrast. And then I think I also want a little bit of contrast right here. Now that's a super small brush. This one is a 0, I think. So then I'll come back and kind of smooth that out. So I think the last thing that I might want to do with this is just add a little bit more color down here. So let's just kind of cover some of that pencil. I forgot about my dots and dashes. But we can kind of, you know, do it again that way. Now what I don't want to lose is I don't want to lose that yellow strip, because that's what's differentiating the petals. So I'm going to come in here now with a clean wet brush that I've just rinsed and tapped and pick that up. Okay, so I think that's all I'm going to do on the petal for now. Okay, this is not my favorite, I'll just tell you right now, it's not my favorite tulip I've ever painted. But I think that I got to start, rather than continuing to fiddle with that, I got to bop around. So let's see what else I have going on. I can add a little more dark. So let's talk about the paint here. You see how this is all streaky? That's not, it's just not gonna work right. It's too streaky and dry. So then I need to add some water so I get more of a puddle effect, not petal. And I'm already gonna add, I've already used this green here, so I'm gonna put that in my palette too, just so I have a couple green options. And then I could even come in with some yellow to make different green options. So I'll just leave all those right there so I can kind of pull them and see how it goes. Okay, but first what I'd like to do is I would like to darken the backside of the stem. And I am gonna, that's a pretty, I can see that this is a pretty bright green, but you can see that away from the light, it's darker on this side. So let's go ahead and do that. Another dog hair. And then I might even, as I come down here, make it a little darker, because wouldn't it be darker as I get further away from the light and into the petals? Yes, it would. And then let's just tap that out. And then check this out. I'm gonna glaze it or soften it, but I'm gonna soften it in kind of dots and dashes a little bit. See, it's already kind of popping off the page a little bit more with that darker value. Now I'm going to take a bigger brush. This is a round 10. And you know, when you get these sable brushes, they do have gum arabic in them, so they harden. They come hard and then they harden after you clean them and put them into a point. So just be careful when you use them. You know, pretty much every time you got to let them soften in water a little bit. If you bend them, they'll snap. Well, I don't actually know that because I've never done it, but that's what I've heard, and you don't want to do it. So now I can do, before I get to the leaves, let's do a little more kind of wet in this stem, because I kind of like how this paint is moving. So, and it's kind of nice and soft. And so what I think I might do now that it's wet is just kind of add a little bit more stuff here and get that dark off of there, and maybe add this dark, which is not quite as dark. And then just let that do its thing and see, you know, see how it looks afterwards. I could even do a little lifting on the light side where it would be touching. I wish I had a little more lift. I wasn't paying attention to my light source, so I kind of missed the boat on that one. But you know, that's also kind of a more challenging technique. Maybe not where we're at right now. And this pencil here, I can actually erase when everything's done, because I never touch that. Once you go over pencil with watercolor, you can't erase it. But if it's on paper, I could totally erase that. All right, so now I just want to take a little more green. And I'm thinking this leaf is coming here. Now I'm just gonna hold this really loosely and kind of just see, like, you know, what can I do there? It's a big shape to fill. And I don't want to lose what I have going on here with my stems, so I'm just kind of lifting that off. And then I can even bring this up here to get a little more consistency. And let's try it again. I'm going to get some of this darker green down here. And I don't know what I'm doing exactly. I'm just kind of trying to, leaves are hard to make. They're easy in the sense of the shape is easy, but they're kind of hard to make interesting, which is why I prefer to just let the brush do the work for me, because they're just kind of, you know, not that interesting. And then I think what I might do is try to lift a little of this, since that's kind of where our light source is. And it did lift, that's great. Some of it's dried underneath, but I can even get my brush a little wetter and sort of activate this paint a little bit. Now the stuff underneath is not really gonna lift because it's kind of dried in there, and it's a staining pigment. So it will stain the paper, which means it won't be able to lift, but I can lift it a little bit to get a little more variety. Now this one over here, I can certainly lift, and I probably should have left that clean or unpainted. And then again, for a little contrast, why don't we, you know, and let's kind of check out what our leaves are doing here. Everything's kind of going into a point in a straight line. Oh, it's curling a little bit. That's cool. I didn't really do my drawing such that I can make it curl at this point, but I can at least kind of add a little more stuff. And then I'll tell you, if all else fails and you just can't stand what you've done, take a big brush, wet it, loosen it, and then kind of touch in here and let the paint help you out. Probably could have done that. I might even still be able to do that a little bit here. Oh, there it goes. Can activate it just a little. And that also kind of helps us get a little background. Ooh, I don't want to do that because I do want to erase that pencil, so I'm not going to go over that one just yet. But that does give us a little bit of background. The reason that this green is splitting into blue is because it's called Cascade Green. It's a Daniel Smith color. It's beautiful. If you get a lot of water in it, it splits into blue. So anyway, that is, you know, I could say a failed tulip experiment. I don't really like it, but that's how you glaze, and I still had fun, and I would rather do this than my legal work. So yeah, which is where I'm headed next. So I'm glad that I had this time with you this morning. So give those tips a try, and I'm just gonna try to loosen this a little because I've got kind of a hard line there, which is not how it's reflected on my tulip. So that'll be a little better there. And don't be afraid, you can see I'm kind of just flicking, you know, don't be afraid to let your brushes have a try. Just doing what they do. If you hold them loosely, that's when things really get interesting. But for the most part, you know, I mean, I say anybody would look at that and say, oh, it's a tulip, so that's good. Maybe this was a really nice idea, but maybe I want to soften some of these shapes a little bit. And now I have a big puddle, so I'm gonna squeeze out my brush and soak that up. And you see that I'm also kind of making a border as I do this. So just different things that I'm practicing to improve my skills and my enjoyment. All right, so you saw glazing and mixing and the puddles and all the stuff that I can't show you in class. I hope that was helpful, and give it a try.